Hello and welcome to the Sittin podcast, where we're helping you build a fun and fulfilling marriage, sharing our stories, and giving out advice to move your marriage forward. Now, here's today's show. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to Sittin podcast, the podcast where we try to help you have a fun and fulfilling marriage. I'm John.
And I'm Shalon.
And this is Sittin podcast. So today's topic is Then Came Marriage. Yes, last week we talked about First Comes Love, Then Came Marriage. There's a lot to talk about marriage. That's why we have a whole podcast about it.
Right. There's plenty to talk about. Marriage is a huge topic with never-ending little topics that go with that. Mm-hmm. And so where do you take it?
Right.
Marriage is work. And if you stop working, then where do you go from there?
Right.
You're not married.
Not in a good place.
No. Yeah. Right. What do you think? Is marriage 50-50? Marriage 100-100? Where does that go?
I think marriage is 120-120. I think it takes way more to be married than it does to get married. And it seems like we put all of the work into the actual getting married. And by the time that we get married, we're so tired that we don't actually put the work into stay married. So we put all of that effort into something that lasts an hour or 3, depending on how much you party afterwards, I guess. But, a few hours in a lifetime of commitment, we put all of that work in. And then for whatever reason, people seem to stop working at it and just expect it to happen.
You do put all this effort into the wedding, into the dating, courting, whatever you want to call it, before you get married. And then you put all this money and energy into this giant wedding, then nobody says anything after that. You're kind of released to your own devices. If you had some premarital counseling, that's awesome. Hopefully you had some amazing premarital counseling, but I don't think most people get that.
Right.
And so then you're left to figuring out what marriage looks like. Mm-hmm. Most of the time you're duplicating what you've seen, or you're competing with what you don't want to do on a regular basis with your family history. And so you either want to do better than, so you're competing with that, or you're duplicating what you saw because it was good, or you think it was good, but you're not the same person your parents were, and the person you married isn't the same person. So that may not work. Mm-hmm. And so then you're just like, okay, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, marriage is not going to make you happy. You make your marriage happy. And I think people really have to examine that in their marriages, because we just expect to get married and then have a happy marriage because we're so in love and everything's so good right now. And so I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with anybody else. And I want to spend the rest of my life with this person. But unfortunately, 9 times out of 9, that person gets annoying at some point. It then is when it takes work. If you want to have that happy and fulfilling marriage, it's going to require you working towards that, not just hoping that it happens.
And it's easy to commit to, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor in that moment, because you do love that person. And so you're in. It's going to be good. It's going to be the fairy tale. Right. And it isn't always going to be the fairy tale, for sure. And so you sign up for it and you're excited. And again, you've spent all this time planning the wedding, but not the marriage. Right. And so then what does that every day look like? You wake up the next morning and then what? I mean, you're married. You have the examples on TV, which are not great, and social media, because it's not reality. You have your examples from your family, which could be amazing or not so great, but you have to create your own marriage and what it looks like. And premarital counseling can be great. I'm sure you do a great job. And I do counseling, marriage counseling, premarital counseling, and I'm sure that it's helpful, but it's still, you're not there in that moment. The next morning when you wake up, what do we do to make it a good marriage?
For better or worse is much easier in the better than it is in the worse. So I think it changes just the first time that there is an issue. Some people that takes a while. Some people it's that next morning when you wake up, there's an issue. There's no guarantee. It's going to happen. Right. So you have to figure out how you get through when it's not the fairy tale, because many times, especially women, go into a marriage, with this fairy tale mentality, the things that they've seen portrayed in all of the movies that they like to watch and all of the, stories that they like to read and things like this. It's much different than what reality is. And so Because honestly, if it were reality, then you wouldn't want to read about it because you live it every day, right? And so the reason that you read about those things or you watch those things is because it's something different than what you have every day. And so when it becomes something different than you have every day, what do you try to do? And a lot of people try to then mimic that fairy tale or mimic that story that they've read or that that they've watched, and they try to move their marriage towards that. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to move towards something that's not even real. It doesn't exist. And so the first thing I think that you have to do is find fairy tale moments in your everyday life. You find moments that you can look and say, I never knew it would be like this, or I never thought I would want this, but this is awesome, just in certain moments. And honestly, there's going to be certain moments when you go, I didn't sign up for this. Like, this is not what I wanted.
This is a nightmare moment.
Yeah, you have to find those fairy tale moments in the midst of your everyday life because they exist. It's just we get so busy or so disillusioned that we quit looking for them. But they're there. And I promise you, everything bad that you look for in your marriage, you will find, but everything good that you look for in your marriage, you can find too. You just have to find those moments of fairy tale inside real life.
It's your mindset.
Right.
And if you choose to say, okay, my marriage is bad, there's nothing good, then that's what you're looking for, is things that prove there's nothing good. And if your mindset is my marriage is awesome, it's great, there are great things happening, that's what you're looking for. And so you start your day and you say, this is a great marriage. What are the things that are great about my marriage? You build that into your everyday. What do I love about my spouse every day? And those things start changing your mindset and your perception of what you're looking for in that relationship. And so those create that fairy tale idea of what's good in this moment. Right. When I recognize that your caring heart is what I love so much, then I'm looking for those moments when you're demonstrating your caring heart. The reason I married you is, those kind of things. We talk a lot about fairy tale, probably not that terminology, obviously, for men. Is that something, though, that men are looking for in some way, or is that different?
Everybody's going to go into marriage with some sort of preconceived idea of what it's going to look like. And I think that's going to be just as different as everybody has different personalities. Everybody's going to have those preconceived notions. But I think once you are in it, I think you probably do have expectations based on how you were raised and what you saw in your home or what you saw in other homes and things of that. You've built this, maybe even subconscious. This is very chauvinist and not probably what most guys think, but I mean, it's the stereotypical thing. Like, I'm going to come in and she's going to make me a sandwich and, that type of a thing. And, if you've got that in your head that that's what it's going to be, and then you walk in and, she's like, hey, how you doing? And you're good. I'm pretty hungry. And she's like, oh, well, there's lunch meat in the refrigerator. That's like, wait, I thought that would go differently. And so learning how to, in that moment, shift from being angry or upset or disappointed that she didn't make you a sandwich to, like, I'm pretty capable. I can make a sandwich. Why don't, what if I offered to make her one? Then what does that look like to her? And instead of expecting the marriage to happen in the way that you want it to, maybe you instead try to build it in the way that you want to. If I come in and you tell me there's lunch meat in the fridge and I say, oh, good, I'm going to make a sandwich. Would you like one? It may be set up to where that's what happens every time. Or the next time you walk in and she says, hey, how you doing? And you say, I'm good, I'm a little hungry. She may say, well, let me make you a sandwich, and it's not that she would do that every time, but it's a give and take. And when you start serving the other person, it makes it much easier for them to serve you and want to serve you. And honestly, you build those expectations into your marriage that you are going to serve each other. And it's not that one person's a servant and one person's the master or whatever. It's that you both serve each other. And when you both serve each other, you start building this trust and this even desire to serve each other because it feels good to both of you,
Yeah. You want to do that for the other person because they've done that for you.
Right.
Communicating about it too. As you were talking about it, Going back a little bit, we did have some premarital counseling.
Did we?
It included a video or two of us watching together and then separately. And the one for me included.
We cheated though. We watched them both together.
We did. We did. But it included me being told that I needed to make sure that before he came home from work, that I made sure that I was dressed well and had my makeup on and my hair done and my, jewelry on and dinner ready. That didn't really fit. 31-ish almost years of marriage. So that was 1995. That really still did not fit the time frame in which, the expectation of the
video predated our adult years or even our teenage years, probably. It wasn't before we were born, but it was before we were even beginning to think about marriage when that video was made.
And so those expectations, but that did lead to at least you and I communicating about that. We kind of laughed and I was like, is that are you expecting that? And so creating that ability to. Yeah.
I was expecting us to both get home from work at the same time because I didn't make enough for us to just go live on my salary. So.
Hey, that would have been, we'll talk about it. If I get to stay home, maybe I will cook you some dinner. But it does create that ability to have that communication. And it's so important. And so within the serving each other and those kind of things, knowing what the other person does expect and what the other person does need in the relationship, and having those abilities to create that conversation with either the premarital counseling or even just as situations pop up, creating that communication about, what did you expect? What were you expecting? Why did you have that expectation? Was that something that you grew up with? Is that something you just thought happened? I guess we could have gone way, way back to our childhood and before and said, oh yeah, that's of course. I thought for sure, I would come home or you would come home from work and I would put my pearls on and have dinner on the table, those kind of things. But that wasn't the reality. And so we were able to talk about that. Communicating is a huge part of that, but knowing those expectations and communicating about it and being able to be open and honest about it and knowing what the other person needs and what the other person is thinking and even why, again, is so important, because instead of assuming the other person can read my mind or knows because they love me is a huge part of that. You saying, well, surely she's going to make the sandwich because she loves me, right? Using your example is true. At the same time, understanding why we're doing that instead of expecting it.
Well, because we both came from very different places. The marriages that had been demonstrated to us that we were raised in, from our parents were very, very different. They were just very different households. And not that one was bad and one was good. It was just, they were very different. Your dad was gone a big part of, when you were growing up. He was working somewhere else. And so there was almost a two household thing, and he would come home sometimes on the weekends or holidays and things like that. It wasn't every day seeing that interaction, between the two of them every day. And so you really were going off of what your mom did every day. I lived in two very different households in the same household, because the first part of my life, my parents both always worked. But when I was really young, my mom stayed with me and, babysat some other kids and did stuff like that. And then, when I went to school, she was working, but if I remember correctly, she was normally home when I got home from school and things like that. And dad would get home from work and we just had everybody in the house. Then as I got into my older teenage years, my mom had promoted through her job. She was traveling all the time, and I would take my mom to the airport on Monday morning and she would fly out, and she'd be gone for 2 or 3 days or a week at a time and come back on the weekends. At that point, I started doing, I was doing my own laundry. I was, getting my own meals. I was doing, not that my dad wouldn't do it. It was just now I was old enough where I was doing all that stuff anyway. And so we got into a marriage, and the things that you were expecting to do for me, I was already expecting to do for myself, because I've just always done it that way. And so what you are modeled, whether you want to or not, you bring that into your relationship. And if there's no communication about that, there's only going to be misunderstandings and there's only going to be confusion. And so it's so important that you are able to sit down and talk about all of the ways that you feel like you want the marriage to go, and work that out together down to, are we going to wash dishes together, or am I cooking and you're doing dishes, and then you cook and I do dishes, or do we just both cook and both do dishes? How do we want to do all of this stuff? Because there's things that are going to have to be done, and if you have both decided you're not going to do them and you don't communicate about that, pretty soon you're going to have a bug problem. Like there's going to be issues because you're not taking care of this stuff. And the issues are going to run much deeper than a stack of dishes. They're going to begin to pile up inside of you. And emotionally, you're going to detach from each other. And then you've got bigger problems on your hand when if you had just communicated that to begin with. The thing that I run into, and when I'm counseling, doing pastoral counseling for relationships, is people have really never learned how to communicate. And honestly, it took us a long time to learn how to communicate. I mean, we were well into our marriage before we learned how to effectively communicate with each other. And it was amazing. I mean, once we learned to effectively communicate with each other, then, then believe it or not, we fought, we yelled, we did all of that stuff. But all of that stuff kind of dissipated once we learned how to communicate with each other and became comfortable doing so, and not expecting the other person just to know.
Right. And communication isn't something we teach our kids. We don't get taught as kids. Identifying our emotions isn't something we get taught. I mean, oh yeah, you're happy, you're sad. But beyond that, we really don't get taught that, or how to talk about it or demonstrate it or anything like that. And so it's important that we learn to do that. And then that carries on beyond our childhood into our adulthood and our marriage and those kind of things. And so the importance of that, and then the ability to learn that and carry it on and learn to be a team. I think that's really what we're trying to learn to do, but we don't think about it that way. I think probably knowing both of us now and knowing that we're competitive. And if I was doing our premarital counseling, I would have said, how do you become a team and how do you communicate about it? Pretty sure there would have been baseball signs coming from you and I don't know, calls and things like that. So we could have gotten it right, but I would have been right there with you because I'm a sports fan and I would have been like, great, that's what we need to do.
Well, that's a good point as far as like the signs and stuff like that, because having ADHD and undiagnosed ADHD when I was younger, I would have all of these emotions that were inside of me all of the time that I didn't know what to do with, all that had ever been modeled in front of me. And the only acceptable emotions I knew to have was I could either be really happy and sarcastic and, cracking jokes and be the life of the party, or I could be mad. Like those were the two things. It was one extreme to the other. I couldn't be sad and I couldn't be, blah, or I couldn't be anything. There was those two emotions that in my mind that I was allowed to have. And so that was really hard for you, because you didn't know what I was needing and what I was needing from you in those instances, because you just thought I was mad or you thought I was happy. Those were the two things that I knew how to do. And so that took way longer than I wish it would have for us to figure that out, that, a lot of our problems was just that I didn't know how to express not just emotions, but I didn't know how to express how I was feeling, because I didn't know that I was allowed to feel that way. That was never something that.
Well, and that's part of, you say ADHD, but and then in general, boys and men are not allowed to typically feel anything other than happy and mad.
You rub some dirt on it, you move on. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Yeah.
Now, women can have some other emotions, but we're still not necessarily, and that's evolving and changing. So, but for both, but it's not supposed to go beyond that to affect a lot of things in life. And then all of a sudden in marriage, I'm sorry, you can't turn that off. You still live with that person. It is going to affect things. And so you have to talk about what you're feeling and you have to talk about why. And you can't assume the other person knows, or you can't shut down. I mean, you may need a minute and that's okay, but you have to talk about it, or it creates conflict and problems and all of those kind of things. But if you can create a way to be a team and figure out how to have those conversations and communicate all of those things, and also why you're seeing certain things or why you're believing certain things, because I assumed a lot of things because I was coming from where I was raised in my background, and I'm sure you were assuming a lot of things. And if we just communicated about it, it would have changed so much.
Right. Yeah, and it's learning how to. I think we don't learn how to communicate because we don't like to be vulnerable. Because if you're really going to communicate, it's not just telling the other person, what they need to do. It's telling people what you need, and we don't want to admit that we need things, especially as guys. Most of the time, I mean, like I got everything I need, I'm good, but we're really not. And the difference in being married and happily married is being able to get what you need from your spouse. And it's more than just physical things. It's more than just being married. it's it's being one. It's the other side of you, the other part of you, being able to step in and help you in those situations.
The being vulnerable isn't as much about telling the other person what they need to do. It's about you opening up and saying what you need or how you're feeling, even if you don't know all the details.
Mhm.
And I think that's where it gets scary for everybody, because I don't know that we know all the details when we start talking. Usually, when we start talking is when all the other details start snapping into place, but we don't know at first. So we say, I'm fine.
I think it took about 15 years longer for me to do that than it did for you. You were able to get to a point where you could verbalize what it was you were looking for, what you needed, how I could help you. And honestly, that's all that I had been looking, because that's my heart and that's what I want to do anyway. And so you giving me a roadmap of these are the things that you need and this is what will make you happy, or at least help you be happy or help you be in a better place, then I'm all over that. Like I'm going to do those things. And even after it got to a point for you where you were able to express that to me, it still took me another 10 or 15 years before I realized, that's working out pretty good for her. And I probably could be, I know that she loves me, the same, if not more. And she would be willing to do that same thing for me if I would just express that. And so it took me that long. And then, part of that time was me figuring out, okay, how do I say that without sounding weak? I was trying to be everything for you and not letting you be everything for me. I was trying to be everything for myself and everything for you at the same time. And marriages that last can't last on that. It's not that you weren't giving 100%, because you were. It's that you did not know what you did not know. You didn't know where I was coming from on certain things, or how certain things made me feel, or how what certain words, set off. I hate using the word triggered because it sounds weak or whatever, and it's been overused a lot, but not triggered to the point where I break down, but it is a trigger in my brain that brings up an emotion, or a lot of times that would be anger, because that's the only emotion that I knew. And I think a lot of guys that I talk to, when we're talking about marriage relationships and problems that they're having and things like that, a lot of it does come down to the fact that they refuse to be vulnerable with their wife. And I'm not asking you to be vulnerable at your job. I'm not asking you to be vulnerable out in the world where you have to be the hero or the protector or whatever. But inside your home, that's what your wife was given to you for. I mean, she is to be your helpmate. The Bible said it's not good for man to be alone, because we are going to face things that we are not equipped to handle. Emotions probably being one of the things that we're just not equipped to handle those things, because we have to be able to snap out of those in times when we do have to be the protector, or we do have to do those things. But those things build up, and if we don't have an outlet for that, and we haven't built that communication in marriage to where you can help me carry some of that burden, or you can talk through some of that stuff, then what ends up happening is we grow further and further apart, because you're not giving me what I need, and I'm holding that against you very unfairly, because I've never told you what I need.
And women we're the nurturers, and part of nurturing is emotion.
Right.
So, yeah, absolutely. So then I think part of that is prioritizing our partners and our time with each other. Right. And really recognizing how important our time with the person is. And we get busy. Life is busy. It's easy to say, hey, today is about bills and children, and we'll talk or spend time together tomorrow.
Right.
And tomorrow and tomorrow. And then the next thing we know, it's been 6 months and we have done everyday life and taking care of our kids and our priorities with everything else but our relationship. And so I think it's finding that time that we say we're going to make time for ourselves. And it can be, 10 minutes after the kids go to bed, before you pass out and go to sleep too, because you're exhausted and you have another day, to talk and communicate and make it a little bit special. I mean, like, that's your at-home date time, but you definitely are connecting. And you're having meaningful conversation and you're connecting. It may be sitting on the back patio with a cup of coffee. It may be eating a special dessert that you've hidden in the, vegetable freezer from your children, but you're making that time. I would love to say you definitely get a date night once a month. I know that can't happen for everybody, but
honestly, it doesn't even happen for us. We don't do a date night once a month. Right.
Right.
We
and we don't have any excuse.
Yeah, we really don't. And here's the deal. After being married for 30 years, raising a daughter, sending her off, she's married, has a family of her own. We have grandkids. All of that stuff happened. I remember thinking to myself all of that time, well, if we'll just get through this and then things are going to calm down and we'll have more time together. We'll have more time just for us. The reality of that is you end up filling that time with everything else. And I don't have any more time now than what I had when my daughter was 6 years old. It seems like it's the same amount of time that I have every day. And it's that number is zero. I have zero time because I fill it with everything else. And if you think about it, that's really the same excuse we use not to go to the gym. It's the same issue. It's the same that we use for everything that we know we should be doing, but we're not doing. I just don't have the time. And we've all got the same amount of time. It's just how do we prioritize that time? And so finding time together, we have gotten very good at that, to where we do set aside time where we're together. And that's not always planned time. It's just we are both better now at acknowledging the fact, hey, there's nobody around. We're just both on our phones, or we're just both, scrolling through social media. Neither one of us are doing anything that vital right now. Why don't we, sit down and watch a movie together? Or why don't we just at least sit on the same couch, at least be close to, not text each other from the other room, those type of things. We're better about that now, for sure. But finding those times, even if you're just, like we said earlier, finding the fairy tale and the reality, or find the little moments in the time that you already have. Time together is not time, while you're, watching the kids play ball, or while you're doing this with the kids, or doing that, or doing family time. That's important. Family time is important. We'll talk about that next week. We're going to talk about family on the next episode. But in this, for the marriage, for the actual marriage, it's very important that marriage comes first, and that you set aside time just to be together, to do whatever. It's not, all the guys that are watching or listening are thinking, physical things, and all the women are thinking about all of the deep dark conversations that they can have. And honestly, it needs to be both of those. Like, you need to do each.
Well, and quality time and those kind of things. So sometimes, like you said, it's finding the fairy tale in the moment. So it may be sitting on the couch and watching a movie together. It may be, just sitting next to each other and enjoying sitting next to each other, or being by the fireplace, or whatever. But sometimes it has to be more intentional.
Right.
And it has to be more involved than just watching a movie together. I mean, that's great, but that isn't necessarily it in a nutshell. It has to be more than that.
Right.
And so it does have to be big conversations that are important. It can be, hey, again, you're sharing a favorite dessert or whatever, but it has to be so many more things than just the same thing every time. And it could be, you only have 5 minutes today. You have 15 minutes this moment, but it's using those.
Right.
Especially when you have young kids and you have a busy family, and it's different for us now. We do have more of that time, but it is us. And if you don't take that time to build that marriage and that relationship from the beginning to and I'm not the end, we're not at the end, but where we're at now, then I think it would be very easy to always sit on separate couches and be on our phones and do our own thing and, work late and volunteer and do all the stuff and never really touch base with each other because we weren't making time to create that relation.
And that's how you become disconnected. You have to, that's what keeps that connection strong. And, honestly, that's how you get by with maybe it only being 10 or 15 minutes a day, is that if it's consistently, then there is that connection that takes place. But if it's not consistent, and if it's just we see each other passing in the hall, or I see you as I'm coming in from work and you're going out to work or whatever, because even our schedules aren't, they're not the same. We work very different hours. Mine's very sporadic. I never know exactly where I'm going or when I'm doing it for the most part. And you work by appointment. And so sometimes you may have appointments in the evening. Sometimes you have appointments in the morning. It just all varies. And if we don't take advantage of those times when our paths do cross and we have time to stop, then what happens is we just become ships passing in the night, and so we don't really have that connection anymore. And as that happens, that's when couples begin to drift further and further and further apart. And there's that longing for connection, but it's not there. And it takes a while to build it back. Like it doesn't, you can't not have connection for 3 years and then, say, hey, let's sit for 10 minutes tonight and scroll through Facebook together, or let's sit for 10 minutes or 30 minutes and listen to a podcast together, and then expect the next day to have this magical connection, because it doesn't build that quickly. It just doesn't. I mean, it helps, but it's going to take consistency of doing that. It's like going to the gym and working out for 30 minutes and thinking good till next year. That's my philosophy, but it doesn't work.
I mean, man, if it worked that way. But it's the intentionality of it. Being intentional about connecting with that person. And again, the reality is there are days that you can't, but there are days that you can, and it may be less. It is that you talked about last week, sending that text and letting that person, hey, I know that we're busy. I love you. Have a great day. It's that moment to stop and go ahead and give your partner the hug goodbye and tell them you love them, instead of just bye, love you, out the door, those kind of things. Sitting by each other. It's making it intentional and thinking about, how do I connect with that person that I love so much that I've decided to marry and spend the rest of my life with, and really thinking about that. And so if you are, again, mindful about making that connection and spending that time with them, again, 30 minutes, 30 seconds, anything, depending on what's going on, I think that's a huge part of it. And we dismiss it and go, I have time. I don't have even the 30 seconds. And maybe one day you don't, but the other days you do. And so it's making that intentional decision to make it happen.
So we need to find the fairy tales in the moments, and find those fairy tale times. If it's something that you've been dreaming about your relationship being, then you have to start building that. It doesn't magically happen. So if there's something you want your relationship to, that you aspire for it to be, then you have to put in the work to make that become as close to reality as possible. And so what steps do you take to make that happen? To find those fairy tales in the moments. Communication. You have to learn to communicate. I just imagine that if we did a word count over the life of this podcast for even this next year, that we will talk about the word communication will be listed millions of times because it is the key to everything, to be able to communicate with each other. And so you need to be able to do that, to communicate. And then lastly, to steal those moments together, and find even moments, if they're 5 minutes or 10 minutes, to be together and take advantage of that. And together means you two, not, at a party or with kids or with work responsibility, just the two of you, to find time to do something together, and that something can just be talk. Whatever it needs to be, but to find those moments and to do that is very important.
Absolutely. So, he's John.
And she's Shalon. And this is Sittin in a Tree podcast. find us on the socials, all the social medias. Find us, like us, subscribe on the podcast. All of those things help us get out to more viewers, and it helps us do more with this podcast. So be sure that you like this wherever you see it or you download it. They all do different things. So do whatever it takes. And also, if you could leave a review on Spotify or podcast or even YouTube, leave a review, talk about how this has helped you or what this has done for you or how you've liked this one. If you don't like us, just don't watch us. Don't give it a bad review. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Here we go.